All right. So we're continuing on with the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, page 582, apparently. And he's in a conversation here with the devotee from the Brahmo Samaj, but from Sipur. And he's talking to these devotees and giving them some real jnana here. It says here, I'm going to start two paragraphs earlier just because he's talking about the Atman, and the more information we get, the better we can kind of play with it. It says pure Atman. Okay, so pure Atman is that with me, no me or mine in it. Pure Atman is unattached. Okay, so it identifies with nothing, not even itself. Pure Atman has no attachment whatsoever, and one cannot see it. Right? Well, one cannot see it. So we exist within it like a fish existing within water, and the fish cannot see the water. It has to intuit the water, actually, right? Because it's sort of the same way we can only see the air by its effect. We actually can't see the air. And so with Atman, if pure Atman, we can't see it with any of our senses. It doesn't have an effect, right? It's absolutely yeah, that's all we can say. Pure Atman is unattached and one cannot see it. If salt is mixed with water, one cannot see the salt with the eyes, right? But the potential of salt is in it, even though you can't see it and there's no attachment, as it were, to play with the metaphor there a little bit. He says that which is the pure Atman is the great cause. Right, so that just is a way of saying it is the ultimate reality. It didn't ever do anything to make the dominoes fall, but it is the final destination, as it were. And so they call it the great cause, that which began everything, or that within which everything is. It's Shiva containing Shakti, right? It's the cause of the cause. So that's how he's making sure we don't make it a doer of any kind, right? That this is the one without a second, unchanging, absolute, is what he's pointing at. He says the gross, which is the body, the stuff that the senses can deal with, the gross, the subtle, which is the mechanisms within the body that deal with that receive the senses, the causal, which is the embodied, we could say the embodied soul, and then the great cause is the one, that which is behind it all, the screen upon which everything plays, as it were. The five elements are gross. Mind, buddhi, and ego are subtle. Prakriti, the primal energy, is the cause of all these, and Brahman, pure Atman, is the cause of the cause. So you're kind of seeing the step down there, right? And it's interesting in a way. Well, let's play here a little bit longer. He says this pure Atman alone is our real nature. Okay, so what does that mean? This pure Atman alone is our real nature. That means all of this other stuff, from the body all the way up to the embodied soul, is is not who we are. It's not our nature. It's an expression of our nature, which is why it's always changing, because it's limited from the embodied soul down, as it were, is all changing. So constantly moving or constantly in flux, because it is a snapshot of infinity, right? So it has to be infinite number of snapshots to describe infinity, to play out the play. And it's interesting. I've been playing with this week, although it hasn't really done anything to me except kind of blow my circuits a little bit. Um, in most of our paradigms, I think you would agree, we think of ourselves as me, as I, and we think of everything else as being pure Atman, right? You see, is that you think of everything else out there as being God, right? And you're not God. You're whatever name you gave yourself, that's what you think you are. And you place that as the real thing, and that this other, this pure Atman, when we say pure Atman, we think of it as other immediately. We picture it as separate from ourself in some sort of way. We know that it's inclusive, but we've got our boundary of ego that because we're sitting here thinking about it, we really don't think it's inclusive because otherwise we wouldn't be thinking about it. We would be it. And so I've been playing with this idea because it occurred to me at one point that the real difficulty with this realization, as I see it, is the fact that we insist on being a particular. We're always a point of reference that we're talking about. And that's the whole problem. That's all of the lower stuff, is that whole point of reference. And so I've really started to try and just as a practice, of course, placing my I there. That is my true nature. All of this out there that I've never, anything that I don't include in this little I is not God or is God. I mean, I'm not doing theology here. We're doing poetic play, really. So imagine that is your true nature. Everything that you see around you, everything that you're not identified with right now is you, is the real you. It's like being in the dream again, right? In the dream, you know the real you is the whole dream because it's all within the mind of the sleeper, and you are that sleeper, right? That sleeper could be the great cause, perhaps. It's not actually doing everything in the dream with an intent or a consciousness about every little thing in the dream, but the dream is happening within it. And within that happening dream within it, it chooses a particular to identify with. And if we are in that dream and we're trying to learn that we're the dreamer, we can't get there really by being the particular. Well, that's not true either. How to talk about this? It's pretty green, so I'm coming up with stuff as we're talking. But that you have to somehow know that you are not the body mind, you are not the body in the dream, and that the mind that you're using within the dream is not your embodied mind. There is no embodied mind, right? That you are using the sleeper's mind. So we're all using universal mind, but we're cutting out a small section of it or hemming off or boundarying off a small section of universal mind with ego, right? Ego is our fence where we say this part of the universal mind is mine. And then we've got neighbors, and all of you are my neighbors in the universal mind. You all have your little farm area where you're farming your karma, and you've got it fenced off, and I've got my little plot of the universal mind that I'm farming for my plot and growing my karma and living it out. And we bump into each other and we see each other and we get to know each other and we see each other as different. But ultimately, we live in a we live in a communist society in this dream anyway. And that land belongs to all of us. It doesn't actually really belong to any one person, right? And so this idea of Atman alone is our real nature means that your identity is universal. It's not particular. There's not a point of reference. Your real self has all points of reference. You are all-knowing. And if you were to understand that, there would be no narrative for your life. There would be no story, no conflict, no cause and effect for your life. Why? Because you would be aware of every possibility. You would be aware of your I would be in the table, in the cup, in the iPad, in the window, in the mountain, in the leaf. You would fully know the perspective of all possible perspectives. And if you have that knowledge of all possible perspectives, there's no unknown. And if there's no unknown, there's no narrative, because the narrative is always a discovery. always an acquisition, always a learning, always a getting, right? And so it's our imagined smallness. And we talked yesterday a little bit, just informally, about how powerful that is, that imagined smallness that keeps us in a body mind, even though we live in a conscious world, a world made of consciousness, right? Consciousness is pure Atman with objects in it. So pure Atman with a dose of me and mine in it becomes consciousness. That becomes Shakti, right? As soon as you put the idea of separateness in it, when the pure Atman becomes aware of itself, aware of its own awareness, we're playing again poetically, that becomes Shakti at that point. The waves begin because now it has an I, it has a me and mine, something that's aware of something else, even though that something else is not separate from it. So this is your real nature. This is who you are, right? You are not a person. We read a couple of weeks ago that very staggering statement by Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj when he said there is none such thing as a person, right? So that is the dilemma. And that's why this is so mind-boggling, because we cannot know that with the mind. Because the mind, well, I was always talking in triads, but we can very simplify the triads to just the fact that the mind cannot function if it doesn't have a single point of reference. Something that's asking and something that's listening, right? Or something that's listening and something that's telling. So we've got our self that's a listener to the mind, but then we've also got the self which is active in the mind and telling us the story, right? And we listen to it, listen to it, and listen to it. And we've listened to it and it's always there and it's so consistent and we're so intimate with it that we've attached to it. We've said, that's me. But I'm the one listening to that story, right? It's the same thing that happens in the movie. We talk about this a lot, but the same thing that happens in the movie. If you were not able to attach to the movie, there would be no story for you. You would just see colors and sounds dancing on the white screen, and you would never forget that you were sitting in a theater. But because the movie plays and it's right there in front of you and all your senses are engaged with it, you identify with it. And there you suffer, right? You laugh, you cry, you're terrified, you're in peace. And after it's all over, you're like, well, that was a great movie, or that wasn't such a great movie, or whatever it is. So that's all he's trying to tell us. You are the person, you are, in your real nature, you're a white screen upon which awareness is reflected back to itself as a close approximation, a poetic approximation. What is jnana? It is to know oneself and to keep mind in it. Interesting, he doesn't say keep it in mind. He says keep mind in it. Big distinction, right? To keep mind in it, I would imagine that would be the silent mind, right? Where you expand just awareness without interest in what's playing on the screen. You expand, right? Self, and keep mind in it. It is to know the pure Atman, right? To know our identity as general, as universal, that we are either no attributes, you could do it that way, right? Get yourself down to the very essence within all of this, and then pull it out of the dream and put it into the dreamer. So that's why I hesitated before when I said you can't get there by going inside, by seeing yourself from the inside out. But that's one way. The other way would be to see it from the outside in, to start with the idea and let go. Because I am the pure Atman, I let go of everything. That would be jnana. Because I am this small self, I am in relationship with everything. That would be probably the practice of bhakti, right? We have to take that small self through love. Through love, love would be the power that pulls that small little sliver of crystal being, the Satchitananda, out of the dream body and lets it rise up, as it were, into the dreamer's body, right? So we awake, that's what happens when we awaken. That thing which is the same in the dream body as it is in the waking body, the thing that is the same between those two yous, is the only thing that's real. right? That would be the Satchitananda. All the other story of the dream is unreal, right? It ends or it stops when you pull the self out of the dream and place it in the dreamer. Okay. He says, how long should a man perform his duties? Right? How long are you responsible for things? As long as he identifies himself with the body. In other words, as long as he thinks he is the body. Right? So as long as you think that you're the doer, as long as you think that you're particular, as long as you believe the narratives of your mind to be your narratives, then you are held responsible, right? Because you're using your memory to keep track of it. You're using your memory to project a future, and you're engaging in the story as the one making it happen. And so you take responsibility for all those things. And because you take responsibility for them, you hold yourself accountable for them. So as long as we think we're a body, we are subject to our duties. So remember that, if you're practicing the path of jnana and you're like, well, why should I go grocery shopping? I'm not the doer. That's green thinking. That's not you're not quite ripe yet, right? And you're trying to act out the truth without being the truth, and that will only produce a worse ego. Right? That's why Ramakrishna tells us neti neti is the path, not the opposite. Not to say I am God, I am God, I am God, because you don't know what I is and you don't know what God is. And so what's going to happen? Your ego is going to take over and define those for you, and you're going to be in a terrible situation. So that's why we don't go around saying, I'm God, I'm God, I'm God, I'm God. We go around saying, not this, not this, not this, not this, because we're trying to get to that crystalline, unchanging sense of being, right? That is universal in everyone. So he says, in other words, as long as he thinks he is the body, that is what the Gita says, right? To think of the body as the Atman is ajnana, ignorance, right? Because we have to ignore the reality. We have to ignore the that which is listening to the mind, that which is listening to the body. We ignore that and put all of our attention on the changing, not on the unchanging. That's why we call it ignorance, or ignoring the truth, ignoring the biggest piece of the puzzle, because it's necessary for the game to go on. If you don't ignore that, the game stops ultimately. So now he turns to the bearded Brahmo devotee from Shibpur, and he says, are you a Brahmo? Right? Devotee, yes, sir. Master smiling. I can recognize a worshipper of the formless by looking at his face and eyes. Please dive a little deeper. One doesn't get the gem by floating on the surface. As for myself, I accept all the formless, God and God. I accept all, dash, okay, there it is. The formless God and God with form. The Marwari devotees from Bora Bazar entered the room and saluted the master. He began to praise them. So with this Brahmo devotee, it was kind of like Christianity. The God is formless, right? The God has no form. We're not allowed to make an image of God. That's why they built cathedrals. Cathedrals, God is represented by the vast open space that's enclosed in the cathedral. That's why they always are so tall and big and such wide open space. That is the only way that the Christians allow themselves to make a representation of God, right?
Wait a minute, don't they have Jesus up on the cross there? So I'm confused.
Well, yes, and Jesus, yes, that is allowed as Jesus the Son of God, right? So they think of him as the Son of God. That yes, he and God are one. He who's seen him has seen the Father, but they still make a distinction between the Father and the Son. They're two different things to them. God the Father cannot be represented, right? And that's one of the reasons that Da Vinci was it no Michelangelo's picture of God, that was quite controversial when it came out, when it was painted on the ceiling. because it violated that rule. It made a depiction of God. But I guess because it was the Vatican, it got through somehow. I don't know. So he's telling the Brahma is believed only in the formless. And so Ramakrishna is saying, okay, good. He's telling this person to dive a little deeper. Don't stay on the surface. Don't take the easy route and give God all kinds of attributes except for form, right? Because that's if God is formless, that means in every sense, right? There's nothing to touch, nothing to smell, nothing to see, nothing to hear, nothing to do. Right? God is formless, so he has no sensual information coming from him whatsoever in that sense. And so a lot of times when we practice the worship of the formless, we give him every other attribute except for form, the boundaries of manifestation, right? Which is kind of a there's no way around it, really. It's acceptable, but Ramakrishna is telling her to go, why don't you go a little bit deeper, right? Go a little bit deeper. So, all right. So the devotees from Marwari, or the Marwari devotees from Pura Bazaar, entered the room and saluted the master. He began to praise them. Master to the devotees, ah, they are the real devotees of God. They visit temples, they sing hymns to God, they eat prasad, and the gentleman whom they have made their priest this year is learned in the Bhagavata. Marwari devotee, who is this I that says, O Lord, I am thy servant? Ooh, jumps right into it. Wonderful. Master, this is the Linga Sarira, or the embodied soul. It consists of manas, mind, buddhi, chitta, and ahamkara. Who is the embodied soul? Master, it is the Atman bound by the eight fetters. And what is the chitta? It is the I consciousness that says, aha, right? So this Atman is bound by the eight fetters. Those are the things caused by the sense of doership, right? That's the shame, the fear, the whatever. I don't remember the eight fetters. I should pull out my AI, I guess. But those things that basically bind us to our karma are the eight fetters, those things that make us have that sense of responsibility, the things that we feel because we feel responsible for all the things that we assume or imagine that we are doing. So it is the Atman that is bound by the eight fetters. And what is the chitta? It is the I consciousness, that individual sense of I, right? That says, aha, devotee. Well, revered sir, what happens after death? Master, well, according to the Gita, one becomes afterward what one thinks of at the time of death, right? King Bharata thought of his deer and became a deer in his next life. Therefore, one must practice sadhana in order to realize God. If a man thinks of God day and night, he will have the same thought at the hour of death. Right? So this is the idea. Where your mind settles, where your mind wanders, at the time of death, it's kind of like spinning a wheel in a game. Whatever thought or attachment it happens to be sitting on at the time of death, that's where it locks in, uh, because that will be your last refuge, right? That as you die, you'll reach out for a refuge. If you have not been in the practice of taking God alone as your refuge, as you die, you'll reach out for your most favorite refuge, and that's what you become, according to this thing here. So he says one must practice sadhana, that constant chanting of the name of God, singing his glories, being ever mindful of him, doing your service, uh, working on purifying your heart, removing the me and mine from yourself, right? So that in that last moment you're in meditation. That's why Mother asked everybody to leave her room and sent everybody home. She didn't want her mind to rest on any particular person as she left the body. So she let everybody leave the room. That's why when Swami Prabhupada passed away, the room was full of devotees, but everybody was chanting Ramakrishna's name, as he passed to remind him. And that's why we do that when we go to visit somebody in the hospital or whatnot in that space, to help them keep their mind on the divine, to take refuge in God alone. Why don't we feel dispassion toward worldly objects, right? Since they never give us what they promise. Why can't we develop a sense of dispassion for them? Why are we so attached to them, even though they just basically keep us hungry, keep us wanting more? Master, because of Maya, right? So it's kind of just the game. We don't know why. That just, since we're not thinking of the self, we think of something else. And we just get caught up in the narrative. We just forget. We just ignore. Because of Maya, through Maya, one feels the real to be the unreal, right? God becomes something we wonder if he even exists. Is there really such a thing? That which is real seems to be unreal, and the unreal seems to be real. Maya flips it upside down. We think we're the particular and that the general is not us, but it's the other way around. We are the general and we are the container of the particular, but we are not the particular, right? The real means that which is eternal, the supreme Brahman, and the unreal means that which is non-eternal, that is to say, the world, right? So anything composed, right? Vivekananda says anything that's composed of more than one, anything, something that requires something else, is unreal, right? And must decompose. It must die. It must be undone. And so that which is composed must decompose. That which changes is unreal. We read the scriptures. Why is it that we can't assimilate them? Right? Master, what will one accomplish by mere reading? One needs spiritual practice and austerity. Right? That's because this doesn't happen as a tower of thinking. It's not an accomplishment of thought or philosophy. This is an absence of identity that we're trying to understand, right? That we're trying to absorb, as it were. What will one accomplish by mere reading? One needs spiritual practice, austerity. Call on God. What is the use of merely repeating the word siddhi? One must eat a little of it. Let that root get down. Part of meditation is allowing these truths that we understand in a surface sort of way, allowing them to put down roots and begin to affect why we do things, to affect where we're motivated from, right? And so to go deeper than just an idea, deeper than a belief, deeper than just a philosophy, deeper than a ritual. This has to be something that we have to allow to come in and infect our very sense of being, right? Infect the very sense of what I am. And what does that mean? Well, that means that you are love, right? And so you try and get that to the point where you're not practicing that, but you've accepted it as one of the axioms of who you are. And so you're loving not for any other reason than you are love, right? That's to take the idea of loving deeper. Now we can get it. We start out by practicing it, by, instead of yelling at the cashier, which might be our first impulse, we remind ourselves, oh no, I'm loving. And then we act loving, right? Even though our first impulse was anger or whatever like that. And so we learn that self-control. We pull back the narratives that usually take the reins and control our actions. And we remind ourselves, nope, I'm not the narrative. I am love itself. Let me act from that, from who I am. Because if I act from the narrative, I get twisted and caught up in the narrative. And I yell at the cashier. She gets hurt and starts crying. I walk out of the store, sit in the car, and feel awful. Why am I always getting angry? Why did I do that again? Right? So we don't want to get caught in the narrative. So we take these ideals. I am pure Atman, Satchitananda, and you meditate, you ruminate, you sit in that presence. You try and accept this notion of an unconditioned, unchanging, absolute love, and you let it affect everything else, but you just observe and be, observe and be, observe and be. All right. That's what he means. You have to eat a little bit of it. You have to, when you eat something, you take a carrot and it becomes a part of you, right? It gets disseminated through your whole self. You use it to live. And so our this idea of being pure Atman, this idea of being divine, this idea of needing nothing, this idea of not finding and having no necessity for anything outside of ourself, right? These are all ideas that begin to grow and take root, and they begin over time, depending on your sincerity and earnestness. That'll depend on how long it takes, right? It takes that time for these things to be imbibed and to begin to affect you so that your desires fall away, right? That's why I remember talking to Swami Prabhupada. I was having a particular problem when I first got in the monastery. We'll say it was going out to eat, that because before I joined the monastery, I never ate at home. I went out for all three meals every single day. And when I moved into the monastery, all of a sudden I was having to eat in the kitchen, eat in the monastery for all my meals. And every time I'd walk by a restaurant on my walk, or anytime I'd be out and about, I would be like, oh, that looks like a good place. And I'd get drawn out. And so I told Swami, I said, what do I do about this? He says, look, as long as you don't create any new karma, don't worry about it, right? Which means don't give into it. Don't feed it so that it stays a habit. As long as you don't create any new karma, it will fall away, right? It will turn into an echo, and then that echo will fade, and it will be replaced by what you are, right? Because it's unreal. It's not what you are. It's not a part of you. So it will find its place in time. That's why when Girish asked Ramakrishna, "Do I have to stop drinking?" Ramakrishna's response to him was, "No, that's just an external thing to you. Mother will remove it when it's time." Right? So as long as we don't take on those things and add to the karma, don't refresh the karma on them, we just go forward and have faith in Mother. So we don't get caught up in the narrative of having to beat yourself up every time you think or do the wrong thing. Right? You just keep going on, keeping your mind on Mother, accepting her grace, accepting forgiveness, accepting unconditioned love, right? And as you just put your awareness on the wrongdoing, just see it and move on. That seeing it is enough. That awareness is enough, because awareness is a healer. It's Satchitananda. He said, the hand bleeds when it touches a thorny plant. Suppose you bring such a plant and repeat sitting near it. There, the plant is burning. Will that burn the plant? This world is like that thorny plant. Light the fire of knowledge, and with it set the plant ablaze. Only then will it be burnt up. Right? So you just keep adjusting, keep bringing the mind back, keep bringing the mind back. Pull it out of the narrative. Pull it out of the narrative. Recognize the narrative, pull out of it. Recognize the narrative, pull out of it. By narrative, I mean whatever's going through your mind in the moment. Whatever that story is, right? If you wonder what they are, sit and try and be quiet for a moment and pay attention to what's going on in there, and you'll see that your mind is constantly giving you a narrative. Oh, don't forget to go to the grocery store. Oh, tomorrow Sam's coming. You better get that flour for the pancakes. Oh, clean the house. Right? All those narratives. And so you just keep bringing yourself back, keep bringing yourself back. One must labor a little in the stage of sadhana, right? We think we're the doer, and so if our narrative is that we are the doer, then we are the doer. And so we have to work within that framework until we realize we're not, right? We can't short circuit it by becoming lazy and calling ourselves not the doer. Because you look at the direct disciples, they were not doers, and yet they worked ferociously, right? But they sat calmly within themselves. They knew that they were not the actor, that they were not making it happen. They watched themselves work, let's put it that way. They observed themselves working, but they were not the worker. So one must labor a little while at the stage of sadhana. Then the path becomes easy. Steer the boat around the curves of the river, and then let it go with a favorable wind. As long as you live inside the house of Maya, As long as there exists the cloud of Maya, you do not see the effect of the sun of knowledge. Boy, I just read that, the cloud of Maya. It just immediately made me think, because this title of this book that we're going to start studying on Thursday night, The Cloud of Unknowing. Very interesting, huh? The Cloud of Unknowing, a Christian book, has the same title as this sentence right here, The Cloud of Maya. And then we know he's talking about unknowing because he says, you do not see the effect of the sun of knowledge, the sun of knowing, right? As long as you are within that cloud of unknowing, as long as you think yourself small, separate, the doer, you cannot see your nature. That's why we're going for silent mind, right? Because only when the narrative stops do we then become aware of what we are, right? As long as there's a narrative, it's got your attention. You're not going to be able to see. You can't see past it, right? The narrative is egoism. It's who you think you are, the story of who you think you are, and why you think you are. That's the cloud of unknowing that surrounds our nature and keeps us from understanding. Come outside the house of Maya. Give up lust and greed, and then the sun of knowledge will destroy ignorance. A lens cannot burn paper inside the house. If you stand outside, then the rays of the sun fall on the lens and the paper burns. Again, the lens cannot burn the paper if there is a cloud. The paper burns when the cloud disappears. Right? So come out of your mind, come out of your body, lust and greed, right? Come out of those things, the things that reinforce that idea of a small self. Come out of that. Sit silently within yourself. You don't have to actually go out anywhere. Just sit silently within the shrine, coming out of the mind, coming out of the body, not letting the narratives of those two things, right, create the stories of lust and greed, which is what the whole manifested world is based on. But behind that lust and greed, it's pure love. It's the lust and greed that gives it a lens, right? The darkness of the mind is destroyed only when a man stands a little apart from lust and greed, and thus, standing apart, practices a little austerity and spiritual discipline, right? Practices a little austerity, practices pulling out of it. You know, I know some folks that take cold showers as one of those practices, to submit to that, to accept that, to open to that, to not need a warm shower to be comfortable, you know, or to not eat certain foods for a period of time, or just whatever. It's practicing things that strengthen your willpower. Those are what austerities are for. Austerity is kind of the gym equipment for strengthening willpower, so that you don't get sucked into your narrative. So stand a little apart from lust and greed, and thus standing apart, practice a little austerity and spiritual discipline. Then only does the cloud of this ego and ignorance vanish, the narrative of self, and the ignoring of that in you which is observing, that the witness, ignoring the witness, paying only attention to the actions. Pull out of that a bit. And when you start doing that, the narratives will cease to affect you, and the ignorance, you won't be ignoring that anymore. You'll be sitting in that. You'll be inundated with that. You'll be infiltrated with that. Right? So the ignorance vanishes. Then only does he attain the knowledge of God. Then is the only time when you know who you are. When nothing is telling you, when nothing is distracting you, then you know who you are. No one has to tell you. And in that silence of mind, in the deep part of your meditation, you become aware of your awareness. You become aware of the divine. This lust and greed is the only cloud that hides the sun of knowledge. Right? Lust and greed. Lust is the identity with body, and thinking it's something in bodies is going to satisfy you. And greed is thinking something outside of yourself is going to give you satisfaction, right? So lust and greed are the two enemies of knowing, the two enemies of inner peace. And if you do things in your day that generate either of those aspects, you won't find inner peace. It's one of the spiritual rules. You won't be at peace if you're lathering lust and greed in any form. Right? So pull yourself out and find the gem in the heart. To the Marwari devotee, the rules for a sannyasi are extremely hard. He cannot have the slightest contact with lust and greed, with woman and gold. He must not accept money with his own hands, and he must not even allow it to be left near him. Lakshman Narayan Marwari, a Vedantist, used to come here very often. One day he saw a dirty sheet on my bed and said, "I shall invest 10,000 rupees in your name. The interest will enable you to pay your expenses." The moment he uttered these words, I fell unconscious, as if struck by a stick. Regaining consciousness, I said to him, "If you utter such words again, you had better not come here. It is impossible for me to touch money. It is also impossible for me to keep it near me." He was a very clever fellow. He said, "Then you too have the idea of acceptance and rejection. In that case, you haven't attained perfect knowledge." "My dear sir," I said, "I haven't yet gone that far." All laugh. Lakshmin Narayan then wanted to leave the money with Hriday. I said to him, "No, that will not do. If you leave it with Hriday, then I shall instruct him to spend it as I wish. If he does not comply, I shall be angry. The very contact of money is bad. No, you can't leave it with Hriday. Won't an object kept near a mirror still be reflected in it?" Right? Now these are for sannyasin. Okay, that's for the path of the monk, not path for the householder. So don't start sitting you thinking you have to go use a foreign bank to get your money far away from you. that's that's not what he's talking about at all. For the householder, you renounce inwardly, right? You always keep these things at a distance within. Don't let them control you. Right? I shared that story. It's like I saw the truth of this, and I'm still seeing the truth of this, actually. Because in San Francisco, the monks had no money. We got no money at all. There was just no money. And at first, it was quite difficult. But when there's no money, it's quite easy. The answer is always no. So you stop thinking about it. I remember when I first joined, I was always looking through the sale ads for Best Buy with all their tech equipment. All right. And after a while, I got tired of it because I was like, why am I can't get any of this stuff. Why do I keep looking at this thing? And it just kind of fell away, right? And then I got posted to a different center, and that center gave the monks $80 a month to pay for toothpaste and deodorant and socks and things like that. And, suddenly with that $80 a month, I was interested in that magazine again. I was interested in that little rag because I thought, oh, that monitor is only $120. If I don't spend any of my 80 this month and only spend half of it next month, I can buy that monitor, right? And it was funny because I felt more poor getting $80 a month than I felt getting nothing.
Hmm.
Because in the nothing, I was free. I didn't have to think about it at all. In the $80, it triggered all of that calculation, all of that wondering, that little desires, right? And it is a big danger. I'm facing it even still, and trying to find and think of a good way to deal with that. And I like this thing here. Won't an object kept near a mirror be reflected in it? It's like even if it doesn't seem to be affecting a person, it will. Just sitting there. Somebody gives you $100, you put that $100 bill on the counter, it just sits there. And every time you pass by it, you're reminded, oh, I can go get some coffee tomorrow. You know, oh, hey, I can go down and get that paper that I was looking for, right? It always just constantly reminds you, oh, there it is. And so he didn't want it anywhere near him. He is the ideal. So he talks in terms of ideals, right? But he didn't forbid it for Sharada Devi, for Holy Mother. Interestingly enough, he gave her the bangles and whatnots so that she would have money for when he was gone, in that sense. So there's a balance in things, right? We see the ideal here, but there's a balance. There are places that have to be thought about and worked out according to your nature, according to what's going on for you. Devotee, revered sir, is a man liberated only when he dies on the bank of the Ganges? Master, it is the knowledge of God alone that gives liberation. The Gyani will certainly attain liberation wherever he may die, whether in a charnel pit or on the bank of the Ganges. But the bank of the Ganges is prescribed for a bound soul, right? If you're not a knower, yeah, it could be helpful because it'll help keep your mind on God to be on the bank of the Ganges, right? Master. Oh, devotee. Revered sir, why does a man dying in Benares become liberated? Master. A person dying in Benares sees the vision of Shiva. Shiva says to him, "This is my aspect with form, my embodiment in Maya. I assume this form for the sake of the devotees. Now look, I am merging in the indivisible Satchitananda." Uttering these words, Shiva withdraws his form and enables the dying person to see Brahman. The Puranas say that even a Chandala endowed with love of God achieves liberation. According to this school, the name of God is enough to liberate a soul. There is no need of such things as worship, sacrifice, the discipline of Tantra, and the recitation of mantras, right? It's the name of God. Why? Because when you say the name of God, it invokes the form, the presence, right? And that presence itself will keep your mind soaking like a rascola in syrup, he says in another point. That name of God reminds you of the beloved, right? And that comes with all of the highest ideals of love, wisdom, and being. And so just to chant the name and put your attention on it, put your sincerity on it, your earnestness into it, right? And Vivekananda says that you chant that name your whole life long. He says, because if you're able to chant it perfectly one time, you will have your realization, right? So we just continue practice for chanting the name, saying it each time with more feeling, more depth, more earnestness, more sincerity, a deeper truth. And then we repeat it again and again. And at that point, when we repeat it perfectly, with our whole heart and soul has said the name with nothing reserved for anything else, you realize God. All right. According to Vivekananda, I don't know, he might have just been teasing us a little bit. That's the idea. Nothing else is necessary. And it's the heart. God wants you united with love. It's not a matter of all of these other things, right? All these rules, all these regulations, all of these practices, all of these scriptures and traditions. They're all in place for the same thing, the mantra, for the same thing, the name of God. They're always there to remind you of God. You know, God doesn't care if you wear shoes in the kitchen. But if it helps you to think of God by taking your shoes off when you go in the kitchen, you do that to remember God in the kitchen, right? God doesn't care whether you taste the stew or not. But if not tasting the stew becomes a form of respect for you to think of God and to offer to God, then by all means do not taste that stew, right? If you practice all of these regulations and traditions thinking that they're important in and of themselves, you've missed the point. They're important only because they point at God, only because they try and remind you and make you aware and keep you mindful. That's their function, right? The things in and of themselves are not the important thing. Right? If you're thinking of God and cooking the stew, no matter what you put in it, it's going to be fine. Right? So we think of God. That's the one most important thing. Divine love. And we'll stop there for today.